We have looked at some spots in the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex during previous videos. Sometimes people say they have a few hours or half a day and ask if I would recommend they visit KSC, and are surprised when I say they shouldn't. But then I say it's because you need a whole day to see all the main things. You might want a 2-day pass if you want to see all the shows or take a special tour. Unless you are waiting for somebody to get tickets, don't wait in line to take selfies by the NASA logo at the gate, but go right in and figure out what things happen at certain times like IMAX shows or guided tours. Looks like there is an astronaut we might get to visit today. Here's a picture of her working on repairs to the Hubble Space Telescope in 1993. If there is a show or guided tour of the rocket garden in the next 15 minutes, wait around until that starts. If you have longer, start with the exhibit on the early days of human spaceflight called Heroes and Legends near the entrance. At the lower level is the Astronaut Hall of Fame. Some of the first members were pioneers from the Mercury and Apollo programs. Then we get to people who were on many space missions once it was no longer big news. There's the first American woman in space, Sally Ride, and Norm Thagard, who was on 7 missions. And today's guest, Kathy Thornton, was 4. But Mike Foale from the UK with 9 patches from 1992 to 2003 tops them all. Back in the rocket garden, there are some old and not so old rockets to give you an idea of their size. Sometimes there are tour guides that will explain things. Check for the times and they will usually answer questions after. All but one of them are actual flight hardware. See if you can guess which is a replica and ask the guide later. The big one lying on its side is a Saturn 1B for the early Apollo tests and Skylab. The Saturn V that took humans to the moon has its own building because it wouldn't fit out here. The Gateway exhibit is supposed to be a futuristic spaceport, so we'll save it for last, but if you're here early, you might find the line shorter. You might also want to check the IMAX or Universe theaters to see if there's a show coming up soon, because it's included in the price of admission here. And wearing a hat can be helpful for more than just sun protection. But we'll continue in the order of our historical tour and board a bus to get to the Apollo exhibit, which will take us through the gates of the Kennedy Space Center and park us within view of the launch pads 39A and B across the Banana River. These are where all the Apollo missions that went to the moon left the Earth, and where the next ones going to the moon on the Artemis program will follow their flight paths. If you signed up for the additional Explore tour, your outbound bus will let you off at a couple of spots to see the launch pads and the vehicle assembly building. I've been out to the first spot, which is right off the beach, a number of times. This is from a few years ago when Artemis 1 was still on Pad B. The 2 big signs have the mission patches of the Apollo and Shuttle missions flown from each pad. Maybe one day there will be added ones for the Crew Dragons from Pad A and Artemis from Pad B. You can see that there are fewer Apollo missions from Pad B, which is further from the VAB, but the shuttle missions were more evenly split. The black tower on Pad A is used by SpaceX and is actually the fixed service structure used for the Space Shuttle program. There was also a rotating service structure that allowed access to the other parts of the vehicle before flight that was not needed for a Falcon rocket. KSC is a working spaceport, so just like you see airplanes taxiing or parked on the ground in an airport, there is always the possibility of seeing flight hardware moved on the ground, like here at LC-39A. This is where most of the Apollo missions were launched and is now owned by SpaceX. There's probably a Falcon Heavy mission coming soon, judging by the multiple boosters here and the one with the nose cone adapter. We'll pass by the KSC press site, where photos and videos of launches since the 1960s were taken. The next stop will be near the VAB, or Vehicle Assembly Building, where the SLS moon rockets are assembled by the same cranes used by Saturn V and Shuttle. The bus will let everybody off long enough to get some photos, and rather than take selfies that will make your nose look big, make friends with somebody on the bus and take each other's photo. The other items on display are a full-size replica of the launch abort system used on the SLS rocket, which would pull the Orion crew capsule off the rocket for Artemis in case of an emergency. There is also an old shuttle-era armored vehicle that could drive the crew away from the pad in case of an emergency. And this is the actual crew access arm from LC-39A that we saw earlier that was used to enter the shuttle orbiter. Imagine yourself in a spacesuit or one of the team helping the astronauts get in what looks like an airplane sitting on its tail. There are conduits for wiring overhead and lights because sometimes your launch time was at night. And there's a fire alarm that never had to be used. Right before you get aboard is the white room where the last adjustments are made. You can still see the cubbyhole names of the last shuttle crew of STS-135 here: Hurley, Ferguson, Magnus, and Walheim. There are some authentic equipment like a dial phone in case there was a launch delay and you had to order pizza. And in the distance you can see the current LC-39A with a Crew Dragon and its crew access arm extended. Even if you don't take the extra tour, you'll pass within view of the VAB, which we featured on a different video, and see one or both of the crawler transporters which starred in another. Likely the bus driver will point out those, and perhaps you will see some construction of the second Artemis mobile launcher, which will accommodate the planned taller SLS Block 1B and Block 2 that the ML-1 was not able to service. So sit on the right side going to the Apollo Saturn building, or on the left side going back to see the VAB, CTs, and ML on the east side of Kennedy Parkway. We will leave the bus to enter the Apollo Saturn building to see an intro video, then step out to see the largest and most powerful space vehicle launched in the 20th century. There are only 3 like this, the others being in the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, and the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. I've seen them all and think the display here at KSC is the best. Because there were plans to have missions up to Apollo 20 and the program was canceled after Apollo 17, this is real flyable hardware that was never used on display. Look for a sign that says when the next docent tour is. It will be worth the time. If it won't be for a while, visit some of the other exhibits and come back at that time. If you have just a fairly short time, you can be one of the few that actually go outside where there is a garden and some bleachers overlooking the water where you can see some of the historic launch facilities. If it will be a while before the next tour, walk around the lunar module, see the Apollo 1 memorial across the bridge from the launch tower to get in line to watch the theater presentation about Apollo 11, where it tells about how they had to make a last-minute decision to change landing spots and almost ran out of fuel. Spoiler alert, they didn't.
To travel a lot farther. So Gene Cernan, that's one of his training seats here off my right and on your left. He's also in the picture in the middle.
One of the actual Apollo astronauts said about the lunar program.
I got to work
If we
with
look
him
at
right
a different
after we
angle,
opened
you
the
can see
building.
the metal wheels for
So we
driving
opened
on
the
the
position
dusty
December
lunar surface.
96.
They also have a practice rover with rubber wheels for practice driving on the Earth. After you go through the theater, there's a dark area with genuine articles from Apollo missions, including the command module from Apollo 14. Now you know this was flown around the moon and returned to the Earth with the 3 astronauts. But what about the lunar module on display? Wouldn't that have been left on the moon? Originally, Apollo 15 was going to use the same kind of LM as flew on the early missions, but was superseded by an extended module with the lunar rover. So what is on display here is LM-9 without the lunar rover that never got used. People ask if they should just wait until they are back at the main part of the visitor complex and go to the big store, but there might be some stuff at the Apollo Saturn gift shop that you won't find at the other ones. So if you see something you like, just buy it. While you're in the gift shop, I'm going to the cafeteria here for something to eat, since it's sometimes less crowded. We'll cover the afternoon in a separate video, but if you want to look for me on the bus ride back, I'll be by the window on the left side.